We just experienced the second biggest bank collapse since 2008, with one bank taking a loss of $2.5 billion. I'm glad we don't have a nationwide shortage, but what is this telling us? We're going to dig into that and a lot more on this episode of the Demetrios Araujo Show. Starting off, we're going to be talking about the Silicone Valley Bank, which recently went under this weekend. So, for those of you that don't know, because I did not know before this video, Silicone Valley Bank is an institution that's been around for approximately 40 years, according to CNBC. The roots of CVB's collapse stem from dislocations spurred by higher rates. As startup clients withdrew deposits to keep their companies afloat in a chilly environment for the IPOs and private funding, SVB found itself short on capital. It's been forced to sell all of its available for sale bonds at $1.8 billion loss, the bank said late Wednesday, which is crazy because you wouldn't even think that it is even reasonably possible for a bank to run out of money. But that's not the only thing that did it. When news of this collapse made it to the public responded by drawing money, which of course I would too. It withdrew lots of it though. $42 billion in 2 days, which left the bank with an end of the day balance of negative $958 million. One customer said, "When you say, hey, get your deposits out, this thing is gonna fail, that's like yelling fire in a crowded theater," Fulvey said. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I would have done the same exact thing if I was in this situation, but at the same time, this is yet another reminder to triple check to make sure that you're banking with an institution that is FDIC protected. In worst situation, it would just come in and just give you your money back because it's backed by the full strength of the United States government and the full strength of the United States dollar. So that's why they would just give you your money back through the FDIC. According to CNBC, the FDC is also giving back money to the people that have an FDIC insured. And they're also working with people to get their money back to them, about 30 to 50% of what they put into bank accounts that were not FDIC backed. But like I said, make sure your bank account is FDIC approved and backed, because that's a very important thing, because you never know what will happen. Now, with that being said, we're going to be moving into the headlines of the week. Okay, so starting off, we are actually going to be reading an article from CNN. We have CNN Style, the best red carpet fashion at the 2023 Oscars. Starting off, according to them, we have Mitchell Williams. Coming in second, we have Sabrina Dywyer Elba and Eldris Elbra. And then third, we actually have Lady Gaga. Fourth, we have Kate Blanchett. We have number 5, Brian Tyree Henry. Number 6, we have Michelle Yeoh. Number 8, I think we have Nicole Kidman. Number 9, Rihanna. Number 10, we have Paul Mescal. Number 11, we have Kay Hai Quinn. Number 12 is Selma Hayek and Pedro Pascal. Number 13, we have Halle Bailey. Number 13, we have Emily Blunt and Dwayne Johnson. Number 13, we have Jessica Jessica Christian. We have number 14, we have Angela Bassett. Number 15, we have Austin Butler. Number 17, we have Andy Armas. Number 16, we have Van Hutt and Hale Berry. And the list goes on and on and on and on and on forever. So, listen, the Oscars, I don't think it was even that interesting because nobody got slapped. Like, why? How come nobody got slapped? We want somebody to get slapped at the Oscars. Nobody's going to watch the Oscars if nobody gets slapped. I did not get any entertainment during the Oscars, so therefore, I'm not going to watch the Oscars. Moving on to the next article, we actually have a CNBC article. The United States government steps in and says people with funds deposited at SVB, which is the Silicone Valley Bank, will be able to access their money. Regulators approved plans on Sunday to backstop both depositors and financial institutions associated with Silicone Valley Bank. Officials will unwind both SVB and Signature Bank, ensuring that depositors will have full access to their funds on Monday. The Federal Reserve stepped in a separate facility that will provide loans up to 1 year of institutions affected by the bank failures. Today, we are taking decisive actions to protect the United States economy by strengthening public confidence in our banking system, leading regulators said in a joint statement. Banking regulators devised a plan Sunday to backstop depositors with money at Silicone Valley Bank, a crucial step in stemming a feared systematic panic brought by the collapse of the tech-focused institution. Depositors at both failed SVB and Signature Bank in New York, which was shuttered Sunday, over similar systematic contagion fears. We have full access to their deposits as part of multiple moves that officials approved over the weekend. Signature had been a popular funding source for cryptocurrency companies. With those with money at the bank will have full access starting on Monday. The Treasury Department designated both SVB and Signature as systematic risks, giving it authority to unwind both institutions in a way that it said, quote, fully protects all depositors. The FDIC's Deposit Insurance Fund will be used to cover depositors, many of whom were uninsured due to the $250,000 cap on guaranteed deposits. That's exactly why, if you have more than $250,000 in a bank account, you should divvy that up into multiple bank accounts. Don't just have one bank account with $2 million in it. Divvy that up to 8 different bank accounts. That's the thing that you should be doing. Along with that move, the Federal Reserve also said that it is creating a new bank term funding program, BTFP, aimed at safeguarding institutions affected by the market instability of the SVB failure. A joint statement from various regulators involved said that there will be no bailouts and no taxpayer costs associated with the new plans. Shareholders and some unsecured creditors will not be protected and will lose all of their investments. Crazy. I mean, that's a good and a bad thing. One, I don't have to pay out of my tax money. That instead goes all to Zelensky. But number two, that's not really that good because now you lose all of your investments into that. So this is why investing is really something that you should really look into before getting yourself into this. Quote, oh wait, I already read that. The Fed facility will offer loans up to 1 year to banks, saving associations, credit unions, and other institutions. Those taking advantage of the facility will be asked to pledge high-quality collateral such as treasuries, agency debt, and mortgage-backed securities. This action will bolster the capability of the banking system to safeguard deposits and ensure the ongoing provision of money and credit to the economy, the Fed said in a statement. The Federal Reserve is prepared to address any liquidity pressures that may arise. The Treasury Department is providing up to $25 billion from its Exchange Stabilization Fund as a backdrop for any potential losses from the funding program. A senior Fed official said that the Treasury program likely wouldn't be needed to and will exist only as a safeguard. The same official expressed confidence the various moves would shore up confidence in the financial system, providing funding guarantees and liquidity considered essential during financial crises. Along with the facility, the Fed said that it will ease conditions and at its discount window, which will use the same conditions as the BTFP. However, the new facility offers more favorable terms, with a longer duration of loans for 1 year versus 90 days. Also, securities will be valued at per value rather than the market value associated at the discount value. The haircut, or reduction in principal, issue is critical as there are estimated to be some $600 billion in unrealized losses that institutions poses and held to maturity treasuries and mortgage-backed securities. This should be enough to stop any congregation from spreading and taking down more banks, which can happen in a blink of an eye in the digital age. Paul Ashworth, chief North America economist at Capital Economics, said in a client note, but contagion has always been more about irrational fear. So we would stress that there is no guarantee that this will work. Markets reacted positively to the developments, with futures tied to the Dow Jones Industrial Average leaping more than 250 points in early voting. Cryptocurrency prices are also rallied strongly, with Bitcoin up more than 7%. Okay, so let me get this straight. So futures tied to the Dow Jones in this horrendous news of a bank collapse went up 250 points. Why? Why is the stock market going up in this huge development of a bank collapsing? This should not be happening. The stock market should be going down with the detrimental loss of 2 institutions and 2 banks. That's just proving to you, one, that the stock market is heavily influenced by these billionaires, probably some of them, that invested in this very company that collapsed. And two, the market does not, it just does not make sense. When Ukraine got invaded by Russia, the stock market went up. But then when Powell raised interest rates, it went down. So it's like it does the opposite. When we raise interest rates, that means that we're going to fight inflation. Why would the stock market go down? Just like how when Russia invaded Ukraine, the stock market also went up. So it's like it's totally opposite of exactly what it should be doing, which makes no sense. And which tells me that somebody is manipulating the market. The news came after Yellen said Sunday morning that there would be no SVB bailout. We're not going to do that again, but we are concerned about depositors and are focused on trying to meet their needs, Yellen said on CBS, Face the Nation. The SVB failure was the nation's largest collapse of a financial institution since Washington's Mutual went under in 2008. The dramatic moves came at just days after SVB, a key financing hub for tech companies, reported that it was struggling, triggering a run on the bank's deposits. Authorities have spent the weekend looking for a larger institution to buy SVB, but came up short. I wouldn't buy it either. PNC was one interested buyer, but backed out, a source told CNBC's Sarah Eason. A senior Treasury official said Sunday evening that a sale is still possible for a Silicone Valley Bank. The initiatives Sunday were done to head off further potential problems. The scenario harkened back to the September 15, 2008 collapse of investment banking giant Lehman Brothers, which also found itself insolvent and in search of a buyer. The government also was unsuccessful in the case following a weekend wrangling, triggering the worst of the global financial crisis. So I completely agree that the government should not step in here, but I also feel bad for the depositors. So there is a certain extent here. The FDIC has to step in for the FDIC insured bank accounts, but that is only 17% of the total bank accounts of Silicon Valley Bank. 83% of the bank accounts at Silicon Valley Bank were not FDIC approved. And also, on top of that, if you had more than $250,000 in your FDIC approved bank account, then you're not going to get more than $250,000. So even if you did have millions of dollars in the account, the FDIC cannot help you because you did not read the fine print of your very bank account you have money in. That's exactly why you need to diversify, and also you need to have multiple bank accounts if you want to keep more than $250,000. That's just the way we have to do it. Oh well. Moving on to the next segment of the Demetrios Araujo Show, and that is a dozen takes. Moving with the first article, we actually have CNN. We have Warren issues statement after her comments on Harris. So, a local Boston radio interview with Senator Elizabeth Warren infuriated many in Vice President Kamala Harris's circle. To them, it's the latest snub of the vice president by a fellow Democrat. CNN senior reporter Edward Isaac Dover has more. So I was watching this before and I was dying laughing because I just find it hilarious. Elizabeth Warren is one of the most stupid senators that we have in the Senate. So just having her comment on Kamala Harris is just Comedy Central right here. Comedy Central. South Park cannot have something better than this because it's just so stupid. One, because Senator Elizabeth Warren is more stupid than Kamala Harris, and I did not think that was possible. And she nearly just pointed out that Kamala Harris is not a good vice president, and now everybody's mad at her. Oh well, she told the truth. This is the one time that Senator Elizabeth Warren got down and dirty and said the truth, and look at what happened to her. So we're gonna hold off on spoiling this because I just want you to embrace it with me live. Like, it's just so stupid. And the way that CNN is like really shaping the narrative for Kamala Harris is just ridiculous in itself also. This is hilarious.
Now that's the feeling inside Vice President Harris's orbit. Pretty insulting. Now that's the feeling inside Vice President Harris's orbit about what Senator Elizabeth Warren said or didn't say just a few weeks ago. Now, that's according to brand new CNN reporting just out this morning. What happened? When Warren was asked by a Boston radio station whether or not President Biden should run again, this is what she had to say.
Yes, he should run again,
Why?
and he is running again, because he has gotten a tremendous amount done. It's been 2 years. He's had the skinniest possible majority in the United States Senate and only a very small majority in the House, and yet look at what we've done.
Exactly. Look at what we've done. We failed in Afghanistan. We got 13 soldiers killed in Afghanistan because of a suicide bomber, and the failure that we had to withdraw the right way from Afghanistan. Look at what we got done. Inflation's at the highest percentage. Look at what we got done. The highest gas prices in the last 50 years. Look at all of the things that we got done, especially the stair-stepping that Joe Biden does as the president of the United States. It is so amazing to see the Joe Biden administration and the Kamala Harris administration, don't forget, that just does amazing things, like the record high border encounters that we have at the Texas and Mexican border. Don't forget that. Oh, and look at that. The fentanyl crisis is rising too. Wow, what an amazing sight from the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris administration.
But when Warren was asked about whether or not Harris should be part of the ticket, this is what she had to say.
I really want to defer to what makes Biden comfortable on his team. I've known Kamala for a long time. I like Kamala. I knew her back when she was an attorney general and I was still teaching, and we worked on the housing crisis together. So we go way back.
Oh, we go way back. But you know, her politics is just way too left from me. Her Venn diagram speeches I love, though. And the yellow school buses, I agree. I love those too.
They have to be a team, and my sense is they are. I don't mean that by suggesting I think there are any problems.
There are no problems, but you know, I just would not support her.
So there's some news about what transpired next, and for that, let's bring in CNN's Isaac Dover to break down all of his new reporting. You see the headline there on your screen. Democratic leaders want the party to stop its Kamala Harris pylon ahead of 2024. So tell us about this phone call that didn't quite happen.
Well, two phone calls. Warren made that comment at the end of January. She immediately realized that there had been a fumble there from
there was no fumble. She was being honest.
Perspective on it. And they put out a statement saying that's not what she meant to imply, that there was any problems with the vice president. Then she called the vice president twice, trying, from what our reporting says, to apologize, to say it's not unintentional here. Didn't mean to make a snub. And Harris has so far not called back. And as to that
There's
quote,
been plenty of time to respond to this phone
it's
call.
6 weeks. But among almost everybody that we spoke with who is anywhere near the vice president, there is a fury over this. And it's because not just what Elizabeth Warren said, but because it feels to them like another one of these, someone else not showing respect to the vice president, not showing appreciation for the work that Kamala Harris has done. They feel like
what? Laughing at every question that she gets? What? How about the border crisis that she was responsible of? We asked Kamala Harris if she visited the border, and she said, "Oh, I also have not been to Europe." Like, that's not the question, Kamala. We asked you if you visited the border because that's your responsibility that was put on you. Did you visit the border? Did you hear about the yellow school buses? No. Listen, Kamala Harris is the worst vice president that we've ever had, and we had a lot of really bad vice presidents. Like the current president of the United States right now. He was a very bad vice president, just like how he's a very bad president. Wow, who would have guessed? Moving with the next article, we actually have another CNN article. We actually have what's going on with all the runway close calls. Now, I'm kind of wondering this too, so if you don't already know, according to CNN, there has been 6 close calls on United States runways this year, which has led to a fair amount of news coverage, some alarm among the flying public, and a lot of calls for answers, including from the acting head of the Federal Aviation Administration, Billy Nolan, who testified on Capitol Hill this week. Unable to explain the spike, Nolan told lawmakers that the agency wants to get to the bottom of things at the safety summit planned for next week. There is also specific investigations into every incident in Boston, Burbank, California, Austin, Texas, Honolulu, New York, and Florida. I talked to CNN's Pete Bernstein, who not only covers aviation but is also a pilot and a flight instructor, for his perspective on what the heck is going on. Our conversation, conducted by phone, is below. Sick with it. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so 6 close calls in the recent weeks. Are all of these distant events, or should we view them as one larger issues? This is what he says. There's definitely a constant theme because they are the same type of event, which is officially known as a runway incursion. It is where two planes eventually get in the way of one another or near the runway. These types of events can range from really minor to really dangerous. What we saw at JFK in New York in January. That had to be one of the more dangerous ones. The air traffic controller had to swoop in and stop a flight that was barreling down the runway toward crossing, taxiing 777 from taking off. That is more extreme. Severe example. There has been some examples where the airplanes get within a few hundred feet from one another, maybe as close as 100 feet. One of these cases like in Austin, but they're not really caused necessarily by the same thing. That, of course, is something that investigations will look at. On Wednesday, the acting head of the FAA on Capitol Hill said that if the dots do connect, they'll correct them as soon as the safety summit happens next week. Although it doesn't seem like there is a real common trigger, no common cause. But who's to blame for these incursions? There are multiple different layers of safeguards in place in the air traffic system, especially at these busy airports where there's a lot of airliners coming in and out in a lot of varying conditions, a lot of different times of the day. Some of the responsibility falls on the air traffic control. Of course, it's their job to keep the airplanes from running into each other. Some of the responsibility falls on the flight crew to keep it so that they follow the instructions of the air traffic control, that they remain vigilant at the time. If they're taxiing across runways or taking off the runway, they're crisscrossing with another one as they're about to land. The good news is that in the commercial aviation in the United States, which is a stellar track record, by the way, there are trained pilots at all time. There are 2 trained pilots at all times, and there are a lot of eyeballs essentially making it so that these things don't happen. Pilots can intercede at any point, and in some cases they have. They just essentially call to their own go arounds to make it so that they don't come in contact with an airplane. In some cases, the air traffic controllers will call it. The onus is on a few different layers here. I'm a pilot, but I did a demonstration with a former NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board investigator at a busy airport, Dulles in Virginia. And it begs pointing out that some of the safeguards are as simple as paint on the runway and taxiways to remind pilots not to taxi too close to the runway. Some of it is just in the phraseology that's used on the radio. Some of it is in the procedures and training on the pilots get. I think about every pilot that's out there now. If you talk to a professional pilot, that is something that weighs on them. This has been a chronic problem for aviation for a while, but now, because of these headlines, it's especially on top of the minds of pilots and air traffic controllers and regulators and safety advocates, which is a lot of different people, by the way. Are these incursions happening more frequently? I think that these events are getting more attention, no doubt that these 6 that we have seen so far this year are extreme. Usually, they don't happen in such severity with such frequently, but the FAA at every layer of aviation from commercial aviation on down to small airplanes and private airports, they're always trying to remind pilots to remain vigilant. Something that pilots really train for in their first lesson is how to behave in and respect the environment around an airport. In some ways, it's like flying with a loaded gun. You have to be really, really careful. The reason why these are happening now, one pilot told, who's the respective for a large union of airline pilots in a major airline. He said that the system is just under so much pressure right now that there's a lot of corporate pressure from airlines to get back on the fleet after the pandemic. There's a lot of new pilots flying right now who may have circulated from regional airlines to larger airlines. A lot of old guard have retired because of the fact that we're giving the airlines money to have them retire, which is just disgusting. See, the United States government was actually giving airlines thousands and thousands of millions of dollars so they can put their pilots on temporary leave during the pandemic because airlines were not leaving. They have technology that can sense at some larger airports whether a pilot is lined up with the wrong thing. If they are aiming for a runway but instead aimed for a taxiway to land on, which has happened before, they have more lighting on the pavement that warns pilots, essentially like a stoplight, to make it so that they don't go rolling across a runway, and that they are taxiing across one. There are even systems that make it so that they can sense under using radar and other technologies where airplanes are on the ground and not just in the sky. Some of these runways incursions are caused simply by airplanes being in the wrong place and they are taxiing and not necessarily in the air. I think the system is up to sniff. I think that the FAA would say that the system is up to snuff, but they're using this as a moment to sort of reinspect and have some introspection on the matter and whether or not they could do more to make it so that these problems can be avoided. Well, you already pointed out that the commercial air aviation in the United States is incredibly safe. The last time that we saw a fatality was in 2018, which was kind of a freak incident where a person got hit on a Southwest flight by a fan blade and broke up in the jet engine. We're reporting on crashes that don't happen. These are close calls, sure, but nobody's been hurt. Nobody's been killed, so it kind of shows, in a way, how safe the system is. Okay, so this should not even be happening at all, actually. If we have the technology that we do now, there should be no excuse why a plane comes within 100 feet of another plane. It should not happen. It should not happen whatsoever. If we have technology, if we have GPS, if we have radars, if we have all these different things, what's the excuse for a plane coming within 100 feet of another plane? There's no excuse. It should not happen. Moving on to the next article, we actually have the MSNBC article. We have Glenn Youngkin, CNN town hall offers GOP bigotry with a smile. Virginia's Republican governor participated in a televised town hall focused on public education. His chipper persona wasn't enough to mark his cruel politics. This is by Jan Jones, the best writer at MSNBC, which is not saying much because the bar is actually dug 20 feet into the dirt. If you're looking for a man with politics mirroring the late Alabama Governor George Wallace and the temperament of a kindergarten teacher, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin is your man. That's funny. That whole entire 2-sentence paragraph that you have here, or I guess 1-sentence paragraph that you have here, is actually the most ridiculous paragraph that I ever have you have ever wrote in your whole entire political career, and the most ridiculous sentence that I ever read in my whole entire life. So the temperament of a kindergarten teacher, that's your temperament. You literally treat every single person you're writing about like a kindergarten teacher. The Republican first-time governor is best known for his fascism-light persona, in which he flirts with the right-wing bigotry and liberalism using a veneer of compassion. My MSNBC colleague, Jishin Elim, for instance, once wrote about Youngkin's on-again, off-again relationship with Donald Trump's baseless claims of election fraud. Thursday was a prime example of Youngkin's political balancing act as he joined CNN for a town hall focused on public education. See, the thing is that you are focusing on, quote, public education, but you do not care about educating anybody. You care about de-educating people. You care about telling people that girls can be guys and guys can be girls, which is de-educating the masses and a whole generation of kids. Thursday was a prime example. Okay, I just read that. And which topics ought to be prohibited from classrooms? Of course, gay porn should not be allowed in any schools at all. Was central to Youngkin's successful gubernatorial campaign back in 2021. He salted on a river of white tears to the governor's mansion and was back to paddling during Thursday's town hall. Okay, so he sailed on a river of white tears. I think this whole entire article is focused on your black tears about Glenn Youngkin and why you just hate him so much, even though he's liberal just like you. And you know, the thing is that he's trying to be bipartisan by going on CNN. He should have never even went on CNN at all. I would have never even went on CNN. If you had ever invited me to CNN town hall, I would say no, hell no. Just like Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida. right now, he is saying no to MSNBC, CNN. He's saying no to all these liberal organizations because he knows that you don't win when you go on those things. They set up questions that are just one-sided. For Republicans, they will bring out this person that you have oppressed, and they will say, oh, look at who you oppressed. And then for a Democrat, they would just bring out somebody and say, look at who Republicans oppress. It's just one-sided, and it does not contribute to anything good happening in our society. So you cannot be focused on being a bipartisan journalist if you're obviously making partisan views on things. Be honest with your audience that's reading your stories. Just like how I am being honest with my audience when I say that I am a complete partisan hack. I am a complete partisan, and I do have my opinion on things, in which you can see in my show. Duh. He salted the river of white tears to the governor's mansion and was back at pedaling during Thursday's town hall, denouncing inclusive learning plans under the misnomer of critical race theory, claiming that students are taught that they are inherently biased and propagating ways to further marginalize LGBTQ students. Okay, so you say critical race theory in quotes. That's not something that is not happening. It is something that is happening. We can see that even when I went to school, I was being peddled things that are just plain racist. We watched Snow White, and the classroom discussion was all about how Snow White was having her white privilege, and how if Snow White was actually black, the whole movie would be better. So it just does not make any sense. We clearly have critical race theory in not just our schools, but our daily life. Watching the event gave viewers a look at Youngkin trying to calibrate in real time. Yes, he exposes a lot of discriminatory views, but he's slightly more self-aware than many of his fellow Republicans in the way in that he knows these viewers are likely to be seen as cruel. So he tries to dance around them or dress on them. Okay, a weird selection of words there. This is the clearest when a Virginia high school student who identifies as a fake man asked whether Youngkin thinks the student should be forced to change in the girls' locker room. Okay, so the person that's pretending to be a man should not be changing in the man's locker room because that's disgusting in one aspect. And two, you are a girl. You should be in the girls' locker room. That's clearly. This is what he said. This is what she said, I should say. Do you really think that the girls in my high school would feel comfortable sharing a restroom with me? The student asked. Well, no. And neither will the girls in the school. And neither will the guys in the school. Nobody. You have turned yourself into a freak that nobody feels comfortable around. Congratulations. As you'll see in the clip below, Youngkin talks in circles and does a great deal of throat clearing before advocating for separate gender-neutral bathrooms. So, discrimination, but make it smiley. Okay, so no. You should not have gender-neutral bathrooms just because you present yourself as the opposite gender. No, you go into the restroom at which you were born as, and which you are, and that's it. Just because you cut your hair short, put on a tuxedo, and cut your eyebrows, and I don't know what you're doing to make yourself look like more of a guy, or more masculine, but that does not change the fact that you are a girl. And you clearly look like a girl. You just look like a more feminine version of a guy. Virginia doesn't allow governors to serve consecutive terms, meaning Youngkin will be in need of a new job before too long. That has fed separation. He could enter 2024 presidential race. If so, he can become an option for conservatives who like their bigotry with a few niceties sprinkled on top. No, I don't want any niceties. Jan Jones, you're just stupid. Of course, like always. That's the moral of the lesson of the day. Jan Jones, you're stupid. This transgender, this fake guy, is also stupid. I'm going to end that article there. Moving on to the next article from NPR. We actually have at least 3 people are dead after 2 boats capsized off the San Diego shoreline. At least 8 people were found dead after authorities discovered 2 capsized boats near Black's Beach in San Diego on Saturday, according to local fire officials. Around 11:30 p.m. local time, authorities received a 911 call that a boat carrying 8 to 10 people have overturned and that the victims were in the water near Torrey Pines. The United States Coast Guard told NPR that they have mistakenly believed 15 people were estimated to be on the boat. The call was made by a Spanish-speaking woman who was on a separate boat with 8 people on it that have already reached the shore, according to the San Diego Fire Department officials. This is one of the worst maritime smuggling tragedies that I could think of, lifeguard chief James Gartland said at a press conference on Sunday. Internal search attempts were hampered by the high tide and weather conditions on Saturday evening. After 6 hours of search and recovery efforts, authorities said that they found a total of 8 deceased people in 2 small overturned fishing boats known as Pengas. Monica Munoz, a spokeswoman for the San Diego Fire Rescue Department, told NPR officials also found several life jackets and fuel barrels. Munoz said, no survivors were encountered during the search, and all of the victims were turned over to the San Diego County Medical Examiner, she said. Searches were continuing on for Sunday for at least 2 people who remain missing. Details on the nationalities, ages, and genders of the boat passengers have not been released, except for all the victims appeared to be adults. Wait a second. So, NPR, you're gonna gender these dead people? How do you know that they do not classify as the gender that they have? Just because they have the opposite genitalia does not mean that they actually classify as that. As we just found out in the MSNBC article by Jen Jones. You can have the male body part, but you can present yourself as a woman. So how do you know? Just because you see a woman with a bulge does not mean that that woman is not a woman, according to Jan Jones. So NPR, you are today canceled, I guess. Moving on to the next article by NPR, we have a California county has dumped Dominion, leaving its election operations up in the air. A county in Northern California has terminated its contract with Dominion Voting Systems, a company that faced a barrage of election fraud conspiracies. The controversial decision has now left the county without a way to conduct elections. The county in Shasta County, which is small and rural and occupies the northernmost end of Silicone Valley, the deeply red part of the blue state, has been embroiled in unproven claims of election fraud since 2020. Okay, NPR, you're the fact checkers now. The county's board of supervisors have shifted more conservative in recent years, and the board's director, Patrick Jones, led the charge to dump Dominion, which happened with a 3-2 vote by the supervisors in the late January. Jones has been highly critical of any kind of electronic voting machine. I agree. For people that say that we have fair and free elections without knowing all the things that they have been going on and the things that we know, it's just not true, he said at a meeting in late February. Jones have been focused in anger on Dominion, echoing attacks that the company faced by right-wing conspiracy theories since the 2020 presidential election. Donald Trump and his supporters have repeatedly and falsely claimed that Dominion machines were used to switch votes from Trump to Biden. And how do you know that this did not happen? According to the financial audits for Dominion Voting System, which they have to disclose, we actually saw that the Clinton Foundation has donated millions of dollars to the Dominion Voting System, and so did Bush's administration. So it just does not make any sense. We have 2 different politicians donating to this Dominion Voting System. How about no politician at all invest into this Dominion Voting System? If you have no connection to a politician whatsoever, boom, you can donate. But instead of this happening, which is the right thing of this happening, we have the Dominion Voting System taking money from politicians. Moving to the next article, we actually have a Fox News article. If I can get it up real quick, I would love that. Okay, excuse me. Okay, so according to Fox News, Biden expected to approve enormous oil drill project in blow to climate change activists. Complete betrayal. Project developer says that it will produce up to 180,000 barrels of oil per day at its peak, deliver billions of dollars in revenue to the region. Good. This is the first thing that Joe Biden did good for America. The Biden administration, too, is expected to soon push ahead with a massive Northern Alaska oil drilling project that is forecasted to create thousands of jobs and 600 million barrels of oil over the next 30-year lifespan, according to the multiple reports. Senior administration officials have signed off on 3 of the 5 drilling sites proposed by the oil company ConocoPhillips as part of its Willow project in the National Petroleum Reserve, located in the North Slope, Burrell, Alaska. Bloomberg reported Friday evening. ConocoPhillips previously stated that for the project to remain economically viable, the federal government would need to approve at least three of these sites. The Department of Interior, the DOI, will publish the final decision by the Willow Project, but President Biden and senior White House officials have been actively involved in overseeing the approval process. Industry groups, Alaska lawmakers, and local communities have urged the president to approve the project for its economic benefits, while activists argued it would have a devastating impact on the environment. The decision on Willow is a huge test for the Biden administration in so many ways that they claim to care about, Senator Dan Sullivan, Republican from Alaska, told Fox News Digital in an interview last week. Of course, it's critically important to Alaska, but it's critically important to America. A project of this size will need some energy security. In a statement Saturday, the White House noted Biden's aggressive climate agenda and denied the decision has been made on Willow. President Biden is delivering the most aggressive climate agenda of any United States president. Of course he was, and of course he is, because he's a political hack. In history, in spearing an unprecedented expansion of clean energy, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said in a statement to Fox News Digital. The Department of Interior will make an independent decision of the Willow Project. She continued, no final decisions have been made. Anyone who says that they have been made a final decision is wrong. The expected final record of the decision comes years after the ConocoPhillips first proposed the project. The company has projected that it will produce up to 180,000 barrels of oil per day and create more than 2,500 construction jobs and 300 long-term jobs, and deliver as much as $17 billion in revenue for the federal government, Alaska, and local communities, many of which is indigenous. Oh, Fox News. It doesn't matter if they're indigenous. It matters that we're getting $17 billion from this project. That's great. We can start paying off our debt. We have billions of dollars of debt. Start paying that off with the $17 billion in revenue the United States government will be getting. Oh my God, I would love to get that much money. Moving on to the next article, we actually have another Fox News article. We have, let's see here if this will open. That one. Great. Okay. So here's how progressive lawyers are using public nuisance lawsuits to outlaw guns. Ohio Schooner says public nuisance lawsuits are a next Trojan horse for the progressive agenda. A consumer protection group is warning Republican governors against attempts by the left-leaning lawyers to use public nuisance lawsuits as a backdoor way to outlaw guns. The Alliance for Consumers, the AFC, a nonprofit organization aimed at ensuring customer protection efforts, class action lawsuits, and attorney general enforcement actions benefit customers, sent a letter to all GOP governors Friday saying that since the many state legislators have recently flipped to Republican majority, there should be a lockout for progressive activists attacking gun rights through these legal actions. With victories through the legislative process becoming harder to achieve, the progressive left is increasingly looking to an alliance of activists, officials, and trial lawyers to weaponize the judicial system against conservatives and impose key policy priorities by the way of the public nuisance lawsuits. The AFC president, O.H. Scummer, wrote, Under the guise of compensation for injuries to the overall public interest, these lawsuits open the door to courts imposing sweeping policy solutions outside the traditional government processes, or otherwise reshaping the economy through massive money transfers, Scummer said. Public nuisance lawyers vary from state to state. Historically, they have been used to protect the consumers and the public against things like polluted waterways or hazardous public spaces. However, Skinner said activists have found a new way to use the court system as a weapon to force companies and consumers to comply with a progressive worldview without legislative oversight or public scrutiny. If you hear someone say, we should bring a nuisance case, that is a Trojan horse to accomplish something that you probably don't agree with, Skinner said in an interview with Fox News Digital. Skinner claims that there is a true goal of most nuisance suits over things like plastics, fossil fuels, or firearms, seemingly to remove projects and services from the market that do not align with the progressive agenda. Skinner said that the progressive trial lawyers will try to make the case that just as fossil fuels and plastics are bad for the environment, that is shared by public. Guns can also cause public harm, and therefore, courts should curb their use because of this public nuisance. One example of this already taking place, Skinner noted, in a case from 2022 brought by the leading personal injury lawyer firm, Napoli Skunnik, that filed public nuisance suits on behalf of the New York Times, on behalf of New York, cites Buffalo and Rochester. According to Skinner, the suit claimed that major American firearms manufacturers work to design, produce, market, and sell has created, contribute to, and maintain the public nuisance of unlawful possession, transportation, and disposition of firearms, and the utilization of guns and the commission of an offense. Activists have largely been able to hide the ideological aspects of public nuisance legislation, Skinner said. But make no mistake, public nuisance claims are about liberal control, not about the money, and certainly not about helping consumers. Montana Attorney General Austin Kunston told Fox News Digital that while the public nuisance laws have their place, there are a tool that needs to exist. Governors and state legislators should consider making changes to such laws so they are not abused. Quote, we see these progressive groups getting creative and trying more and more different alternative avenues that they can get around some of these pre-exemption laws, Kunston said. Okay, so we're going to stop right there. That just makes no sense. You can't have a gun because it causes a public nuisance, number one. And number two, if you don't make changes to the law, then they get abused. No, that's not true at all. According to the First Amendment of the United States of America, we have the freedom of speech. If we don't change the law, then it gets abused. Why? How can you abuse your First Amendment right of the United States? How about your Second Amendment right? How about the 21st Amendment right of the United States Constitution, which allows women to vote? How about the 18th Amendment that allows black people to vote? Wow. So if we don't change those laws, then it's going to get abused. How can you have an abuse of the situation of women voting? And how can you have an abuse of a system that allows black people to vote? How is that? That doesn't make any sense. Just like how that whole entire article of the lawyers attacking and pushing their progressive views on cases makes no sense. So that's going to be it for this episode of the Demetrios Araujo Show. If you did enjoy this episode, please like and subscribe down below because I do post new episodes of this show every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Thank you all for watching, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day.